In Chicago 1990, a guy gets into a taxi and asks the driver to turn up the radio, which is tuned to a sports channel talking about basketball.
Michael Jordan, 42 points.
The man tells the driver that Michael Jordan can do things that he's never seen any other player do in his life.
Plenty of fellas came before Michael that could do things you never seen in your life. Oh, Connie Hawkins, Elgin Baylor, Julius Erving.
All right, what about you?
The man asks the driver about his story with basketball, since they have some time on their hands.
I know my game. A lot of people don't know how it went down.
The highly anticipated rematch between the Globetrotters and the NBA champ Minneapolis Lakers.
The Lakers commanded the first league, but the Trotters came back in the second half due to the gameplay of one player named Nat Sweetwater Clifton. On the court, Sweetwater blocks the Laker giant George Mikan, and the commentators go wild because no one has done that before. When the game becomes a tie, the Globetrotters, which is a completely black team, start to do several funny tricks with the ball, which excites the audience. They play around, and Sweetwater scores another point. Their coach, Abe, boasts that his boys are the best to a promoter named Ned Irish.
Irish, did you see that? Have you ever seen anything like that before? No, you haven't, because it hasn't happened prior.
A guy named Joe talks to Irish about how good Sweetwater is.
The size of Sweetwater's hands, it makes the ball look like a grapefruit.
It's like a circus. It's ringling rock.
Yeah, everyone's here to see that.
Sweetwater scores the final point, and they celebrate. In the locker room, Joe comes to introduce himself to Sweetwater and tells him he coaches a team known as the New York Knickerbockers. Sweetwater tells him that's clear that blacks don't play in his league.
It's not going to be like that forever. You can be the first. I'll catch you later, Sweetwater.
Sweetwater sits down and looks at his hands, and it brings back some memories.
Ow!
Put him on.
He gets injured, and his mom tends to him and gives him some water mixed with sugar.
A little bit of sugar makes the water taste so much sweeter.
Before he leaves with his father, she tells him his dad will take him to the big city, and he'll have a better life. Clifton doesn't want to leave.
Take these hands God gifted you with. You put them to good use. I always know you was born with a higher purpose. Just gotta believe.
In the present day, Sweetwater goes outside to join the other guys in Abe's Globetrotter bus, and he hands them their paycheck. Abe notices a sour look on Sweetwater's face and asks him to say something. When Sweetwater insists they're getting paid less than the team they beat.
You're not hearing what I'm saying, Abe.
Abe honors his complaint and gives them more cash.
Extra cabbage.
The coach announces to them that tonight's win allows them to travel around the globe, and he hopes that one day they'll become an NBA team.
Thanks, brother.
The next day, in the NBA offices in New York City, the board members get into an argument about allowing black people to be drafted in the NBA.
The Celtics are very interested in drafting a Negro player.
Their president, Podoloff, calms them down and tells them it's not against the bylaw to do so.
It's unnecessary to have all razzle-dazzle, hot dog and bullcrap on our court. Razzle-dazzle? Well, I find it exciting and, quite honestly, entertaining like a dance.
There's a motion on the table. It says the NBA wants to remain an all-white league. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Guys have it.
Later, Irish explains to Joe that he tried his best to pass the motion that blacks join the NBA, but they lost the motion.
The NBA champs got their asses kicked by an all-Negro team.
Joe insists that no team could beat the Trotters if they had a franchise in their league and considers resigning to pursue that, but Irish reminds him that their team players are counting on him to take them to the finals, and he can't do that. Meanwhile, the Globetrotters play another group of white guys with their circus style of gameplay.
I got him! No, they falling on me?
Yes, sir. You're 2-2.
After the game, the team drives elsewhere, but suddenly runs out of gas because they forgot to fill the tank in the city. Abe parks near a gas pump, and Sweetwater goes outside to fill the tank.
Step away, boy. Need to move away from my lily white pumps.
Sweetwater tells him he didn't mean any harm and says they need some gas so they can get on their way.
You're brave on talking back.
The man refuses to let him pump because he can't pay for it, and Sweetwater takes out some cash.
Your money ain't no good here.
The gentleman that you're somewhat pointing that powerful-looking weapon at, this is basketball legend, Nat Sweetwater Clifton.
The man recognizes them as the Negro basketball team and hands Sweetwater a handkerchief to sign an autograph for his girlfriend. Sweetwater signs on the handkerchief and hands it back with an offended look on his face.
Thank you for the autograph.
The man grabs his gun again and refuses to let them fill their tanks.
Just get back in the bus.
Eventually, the guys push the bus forward till they reach the city. That night, they all try to lodge in a hotel, but the attendant tells them that they have no rooms available. Abe knows he's lying because of the many keys behind him and passes him some money to check again. The man refuses and suggests that they check another place across town.
What about him? Is he at the thumb bar too? Mr. Bananas, this chimp is so talented he's named after the food he eats, whereas my fellas, who are the most talented basketball players in the world, they've got no room here.
I don't make the rules.
Let's go, fellas.
Meanwhile, Joe's wife notices how absent-minded her husband is at the dinner table. She tells him she's never seen him so distraught. He tells her that Sweetwater represents all that he's been fighting for, but there's a wall that the league built against him that he can't break through.
By the time he does, we'll be grandparents.
You are Joe Lapchick. You don't have to break through a wall. You just go get Sweetwater, and you climb over that wall with him.
He wakes up Abe and tells him that he'd like to pitch something to him. In a flashback, Joe tells Irish he thinks they should bring the Globetrotters again. He says they'll sell out the tickets again. Irish replies that the previous crowd came because they were playing against the NBA champions Lakers.
The fans did not come out to see the Lakers. They paid their money to see the Trotters because that's great entertainment.
When Joe proposes having the Trotters play against an all-star college team because they will gather a crowd, Irish hesitantly agrees and says he can go ahead as long as he doesn't have to talk to Abe. Shortly after, the Trotters return to the garden, and they practice some cool skills while Irish and Joe watch. Eventually, Sweetwater scores, and Abe stops them and reminds him not to shoot in with a simple score.
Razzle dazzle. Remember that. That's what the fans paid for.
Later, Joe invites Sweetwater to officially meet Irish, and he comes to introduce himself. Irish tells Sweetwater to stop calling him Sir and tells him to call him Ned.
Just to have it left over from my days in the Army.
The men are impressed to learn he fought in the war, and they tell him to have a seat. As they chat, they talk about Abe's gameplay. Irish talks about how Abe always wants to win and pays his players when they win. Sweetwater tells him that it's not like that, but Abe pays the other players to let them win, but he doesn't understand why when they can beat them anyway.
We do things with this basketball don't even exist in your dream.
And he would love to be paid for that and not be part of a circus. Later that evening, the Trotters play against the college basketball team and dominate them. In the last few seconds, the fellas take a timeout and decide to make the last minute count.
Wait.
The crowd goes wild. After the game, the guys leave, and Irish gives Abe a payment of about $2,000. Sweetwater overhears them talking and hears that the other team was paid $100 each. Before Sweetwater leaves, he runs into Joe.
I won a couple championships here with St. John. You cannot get one past me. You know what? I wasn't warmed up.
That night, Abe tells them that the clutch on the bus gave out, so he has to get a mechanic in the morning. Sweetwater steps out to go to a club called the 52nd Street Nightclub, but the people at the door tell him they're closed. Irish comes to bail him out and tells them he's with him. At the bar, Irish asks for a bourbon, but Sweetwater just asks for a cup of water and 2 scoops of sugar. They listen to a beautiful woman named Jean sing some jazz, and the people clap for her. Sweetwater tells Irish that Jean knows how to bend notes and talks about how much he loves jazz. After Jean's performance, Sweetwater walks up to her and politely tells her he really enjoyed her singing.
Thanks.
He proceeds to leave, so she calls him back and tells him to have a seat. He tells her she has a nice soulful voice, and she tells him she loves the blues. Sweetwater talks about a cool after-hours joint up in Harlem that only starts going quite late and asks her if that's something she'll consider.
No such thing as too late.
So they both head to the club, and Sweetwater leads Jean into their midst. Jean immediately recognizes the lead singer, T-Bone, who seems to be someone whose singing she admires. While they all dance, T-Bone stops the singing and introduces Sweetwater to everyone as his good friend. Sweetwater signals that he'd like Jean to sing, so T-Bone tells him to bring her up. Jean climbs the stage and kills it, and the crowd dances to her lovely singing. After they're done, T-Bone asks Jean to come sing with them again the next time they're in town. She thanks him and calls him Sir, but he tells her to just call him T-Bone. The next morning, after the practice, Irish and Joe talk about how much the leagues and the owners are going to fight against their idea of drafting a black person. Joe insists that Sweetwater's knows the game better than anyone.
I will fight for this. Could get ugly. I was born ugly.
Outside, Irish approaches Abe and commends their game. He hands Abe a deal for $5,000 in cash to buy Sweetwater's contract. Abe tells him that's not happening because Sweetwater makes money for him.
What is your angle? You don't really think Sweetwater's going to play in the NBA?
Win a couple of championships, maybe? For the glory. Why not?
When they reach the Boondocks for the next game, Abe pays the opposing team and the referee off with $75 each to play along with the shenanigans on the court. The game soon begins, and the boys do their funny style of play and amuse the audience as usual while they score. At one point, Sweetwater stops everyone and asks if they believe in magic. Out of nowhere, he picks out a little boy from the audience and hands him the ball. He lifts the kid, and he successfully dunks the ball. Abe is surprised since this was never part of the plan, but he just tells them to wrap up the game. Before they continue, Sweetwater sees that the score is 70-48 and they're winning. He proposes that they make the game more interesting. When they're done, it's a tie, and they only have 3 seconds on the clock. Sweetwater makes the final throw from the middle of the court to beat the time, almost giving the coach a heart attack, but they win. After the game, the coach asks him what the heck that was, and Sweetwater tells him that it's the shenanigans he pays them to do. When they're back on the bus, Abe pays them all for their hard work. Sweetwater asks the guys how much they were paid, and everyone says they were paid $50. He asks Abe to tell the boys how much he pays the other team. When the coach asks what's wrong, he says they're getting paid less to win, and the white boys are being paid more to lose.
I don't know. Maybe I should switch teams. Big question is, how much are you making?
Oh, you were but a babe when I created this team. I'm your boss.
He tells them he's the reason this team exists, and he does whatever it takes to get them their next meet and get them recognition for what they do better than anyone else. He tells them to stick to playing basketball, since that's their job. Sweetwater tells him this isn't about basketball, because they're just made into a circus. He reminds him that they beat the world champions, and they believe they can beat any team fair and square. He explains that Abe paying off the other team to lose takes out all the fun from actually whooping their behinds. Abe uncomfortably reminds them what he thought they all understood. He tells them, as a they can't play basketball except for him, and nobody can tell him how to run his team. As they prepare to leave, Abe hears a knock on the door that turns out to be Irish. Abe steps out to speak with Irish and Joe. Joe commends Abe that his team is the best on the planet, and he recognizes his brilliance, so they're here to finish what he started.
A Negro basketball player will walk onto an NBA court, so help me God.
When the coach asks how much they're offering,
10,000 shekels, as you call it. Now, that's more money than anyone will pay for a Negro player. And I'm certain that you'll make sure Sweets gets some of it.
Abe hesitates and tells them that he's going to give them Sweetwater.
Don't even think about it. That's my car. You're never getting my car, Abe.
Only if he gets to keep all the money, and they pay Sweetwater another $2,500 before he can get his salary, and they shake hands. The coach returns to the bus and tells Sweetwater Irish just bought his contract.
Famed New York Knickerbockers has just hired Sweetwater Clifton, a starting salary of $2,500. You are free to play in the NBA.
Take me with you.
Before he leaves, Sweetwater has a heartwarming farewell with his brothers. When he gets to the car, he tries to sit in the back seat, but Irish insists he sits in the front. In the NBA boardroom, Sid insists that Irish can't play Sweetwater because he'd have to bench a white player.
Which America you living in, Joker? Because your head is so far up your ass, you forgot what the land of the free and the home of the brave stands for.
Podoloff calls Irish aside and tells him he's going to start a war if he goes ahead with this, but he'll fight with him.
Sweetwater Clifton's style of play is creative.
And some of the men agree that their league won't survive with vanilla play, so they need some of that razzle-dazzle.
It's good for business.
Now you're talking. You cannot draft Negro.
But Irish says they all know that the Trotters sell more tickets than any other basketball team, so he suggests that they all draft one black player each in their team. Sid asks Irish why he's fighting so hard for this Negro player.
Because he fought for us.
Sergeant Sweetwater Clifton is a veteran of the United States Army.
So Podoloff moves that they can continue with the draft. At night, the press interviewed Chuck Cooper, Earl Lloyd, and Nat Sweetwater Clifton. Lloyd is asked how it feels to be competing to become the first colored player to play in the NBA.
Just a small town kid, man. I'll be lying to you, man, if I didn't tell you that it's quite frightening.
Cooper is asked the same question.
For me, this is a dream come true.
And he feels like Jackie Robinson felt a couple of years ago, being the first black baseball player. When Sweetwater is also asked what's going on through his mind, when he was arguably the best basketball player before now, he tells them it's not so much about being the best, but he believes all three of them can walk away from their pasts and make a change together. That night, Sweetwater goes to the 52nd Street nightclub. He asks the waiter if they have some food, but the man points him to a poster that says that colored people must stand and eat by order of management. Sweetwater gets annoyed and angrily removes the poster, to the shock of those around and even Jean, who is singing. Later, he's given some food, and he eats while sitting down. Some men approach him and congratulate him for his job starting with the Knicks this season. They suddenly change the topic and tell him to come outside with them to talk about a business proposition.
I insist. Not tonight. Enjoy that meal.
Sweetwater becomes uncomfortable, heads to the kitchen. When he steps outside,
Hey, where you going?
Best not show today or tomorrow. Be more of this.
the cook from the nightclub comes to stop them.
Be more of this.
Later, Gina tends to Sweetwater's wounds, and she sings him a song.
You sure you ain't got no nigga blood in you, honey? Where you been them notes?
He tells her it's like neither of them belong. He playing a white man game, and she singing blues. She breaks the news to him that T-Bone asked her to officially go on the road with him.
And that happening is thanks to you.
Oh, black folk gonna love you.
Black folk gonna love you. And I'm forever grateful.
That night, a random guy bumps into Irish and breaks his finger.
You want to stay healthy? Don't play the Negro.
At Joe's house,
Dad, my friends at school say we're Negroes. Is that true?
Joe just tells his son that that word is an offensive one and they never use that in the house, which he understands. The next morning, Irish calls Podoloff over and tells him to watch Sweetwater practice with the Knicks. In the locker room, Irish hands Sweetwater a check for $2,500. He quickly returns it and jokes that a check to a colored man will bounce higher than a basketball.
If we could figure out a cash situation.
Podoloff thanks Sweetwater and tells him they're happy he's the one breaking the color line in the NBA. The next morning, Irish come to work angry and show the guys the paper about Earl Lloyd's game.
Earl Lloyd played for the Capitals last night.
Joe is also exasperated because the season starts tonight. Sweetwater tells them it's okay since it's a win for Earl Lloyd, but Irish says he knows who's responsible for this.
Don't worry, Ned. I got your back. I'll fight your war for you. Yeah, sure, yeah. That was supposed to be Sweetwater's moment.
But Madison Square Garden, in the middle of Manhattan, you want blood on the floor? You can play Sweetwater tonight.
What if I do?
Dangerous. Could be trouble.
That night, the game against the Indianapolis Olympians, Sid's team, begins in Madison Square Garden, and Joe tells Sweetwater he's starting the game. The game starts, and the ref immediately calls travel on Sweetwater.
That's a travel. Indianapolis ball.
Eventually, Sweetwater gets the ball and scores a basket. The ref says it's not a basket because it's a travel. Joe asks the ref what he's talking about.
Good call, Donnie.
And the crowd boos the ref. Later, Sweetwater steals a ball and goes to score.
That's a foul. Number 8.
Eventually, the Olympians score the first basket. Later, Sweetwater begins the struggle, and the Olympians continue to score. The Olympians score up to 10 points, but Sweetwater later scores their first point. In his next score, he dribbles some players.
What was that, Howard? Gonna be a technical foul?
Never seen it before. Doesn't make it illegal.
But the ref insists that it's a technical foul. Joe has no choice but to substitute Sweetwater and tells him he has to stop with the impressive flashy moves and just follow the rigid rules of the basketball league. After the first half, the Olympians have a score of 44 and the Knicks have 27. In the locker room, Joe tries to raise their spirits and tells them not to beat themselves up, but to follow the fundamentals. As they rush out, Sweet refuses to leave because he'll be out of the game if he gets another technical foul. Sweetwater says Joe told him about change, and he thought that was about changing the game. He says the issue now isn't just his skin, but it seems the league hates the way he plays.
My game belongs on the streets, not in the NBA.
Wonder if I can convince Abe to give me my $12,500 back.
Sweetwater is shocked to learn they paid so much for him. Irish tells him it's not about the money and tells him to come to the court. On the court, the Olympians continue to dominate, and Sweetwater soon shows up, so the coach puts him back in. He scores a basket, but makes a block that is counted as a foul.
It's back to the bench for Sweetwater.
Joe calls a timeout, and McGuire tells the coach that they're a better team with Sweetwater on the court. Sweetwater tells the coach that if he puts him in the game, all focus goes on him, and he can use that to their advantage this time. Joe puts Sweetwater in the game, and this time, Sweetwater ensures he passes to McGuire instead of scoring. Sweetwater scores another two-pointer.
Basketball gods have flipped the switch, Marty.
Suddenly on the court, one of the Olympians pushes down Sweetwater, and a fight almost breaks out.
It's okay. I'm just scared of you. It's okay.
I need basketball. You don't know basketball.
The refs deliberate, and Sweetwater may get his last foul. The refs decide to pass the foul to another member of the Knicks. The Olympians get 2 free throws.
Don't you miss. It's free.
But he misses both due to the tension. Later, one of the Olympians gets a foul, which grants the Knicks 1 shot. While they play, Sweetwater steals the ball, but Joe suddenly calls a timeout just a few seconds to the end.
Give it to him. Come on, let's go.
All right, 10 seconds.
9 seconds to the end, and the tension is high in the Garden. The ball is with Sweetwater, and the crowd starts to count down the seconds. Irish and Podoloff hold their breath, while Sweetwater dribbles the Olympians and scores the final point, winning the game. The entire crowd gets up and starts to chant Sweetwater's name. He waves to them, with a look of shock and exhilaration developing across his face. Back in the present day, Sweetwater drops the sports writer off at the airport.
I'm sitting here writing in a cap with the Nat Sweetwater Clifton.
I can do what Michael Jordan do, but not as good.